Good afternoon to everybody. This is a session on the art of mediation, negotiation, and effective human relations. It's what we normally call the road less traveled in terms of achieving peace. First of all, we have to admit it. Lately, the political debate is getting more and more inflammatory. The practices, the rhetorics show intolerance in many ways, especially political statements. So there is lots of demagogic approaches and less substance. This seems to be the leitmotif of today's politics. So it's very important for the present diplomats, for negotiators of all sectors. It's not just the political negotiators, it's also in the private sector, is in all businesses of the world that you need good skills to interact with people. This is a so-called soft skills that very often are not taught at universities. People naturally come on with and grow and develop these skills. If they don't, they are in trouble. And this is what we discover more and more. So who doesn't is now compelled one way or another to catch up, to develop these skills. And so I think that it's very important to really develop the ability to reach agreements, to not necessarily reach consensus, but have a dialogue, start a dialogue, even with the worst of our enemies, even with those that we dislike. It's so essential in terms of peace building, in terms of advancing also our private, local, national, international interests. So the session this afternoon is about how to combine principles and pragmatism. So what are the principles? When I talk about principles for mediation, by the way, is a process to forge an agreement. It's never a static process. It's always something that develops, that changes, that keeps on changing. So what does it take in order to have a good approach to mediation and negotiation? First of all, we need to know where we stand. What is our attitude? If you are a mediator, it's important to have a sense of impartiality. If you're not impartial, if you take sides in any kind of negotiation where you are supposed to be the in-between person to help the process, then of course you become irrelevant. So that's not what you want to achieve. In any negotiation or mediation, you have to prepare this, do your homeworks. As you are studying at universities, if you don't prepare your file, if you don't prepare the history, recent and past of your case, of the positions that develop throughout a negotiation, you are not prepared. So preparation is essential. You also have to develop a sense of independence. And through that, you also get confidence in yourself, confidence in your means, and also the ability to listen to the others. It's so important. Again, you never sit at a negotiation or a mediation without listening to the counterparts, listening to whoever is a stakeholder in any negotiation. So you need to have analytical skills. You have to analyze. And in order to analyze, what is the very first step? The very first step is to observe. I always keep saying observe the reality, observe how things keep changing. It's not the same thing as reading. It's not the same thing as looking. Observing is something that really gets into the issues, gets into the people, gets into the essence of what we are and what we want to portray. And then other values like being respectful, and therefore respect and have a sense of solidarity, a sense of responsibility, respect for diversity, and therefore also for gender, for cultural differences. So there is an ability that we need, or abilities that we need to develop to have a common vision, and also don't be afraid if there are unmet expectations. If sometimes we think that this is what we're going to achieve, but we are not achieving it immediately. You have to have patience. Time and patience are the best performing warriors. You know that from Tolstoy. And therefore, I finish with this general principles, but I consider essential for our own behavior in any negotiation is creativity and flexibility, ability to really adapt to different circumstances. If we don't have that, if we are in a straitjacket, we will not be able to communicate. So I really insist on these principles as the foundation of any business that you're going to develop, and interaction. That's why we are talking of not only of mediation and negotiation, but also effective human relations. So I have here with me today the privilege of being accompanied by real experts in this field, and I will call them according to the program. David CHIKVAIDZE, who is Vice President of the Swiss Forum for International Affairs, Fellow of the World Academy of Art and Science, and also of the Geneva Center for Security Policy. He was the Chief of Staff of the Director General of the United Nations in Geneva, and I have the privilege of being a friend of his for over 30 years. So at least I say it. I mean, candidly, I admit that we are friends, you know where we start from, but that does not mean that he doesn't have to deliver. So David, the floor is yours. Tell us, what does it take? What is your suggestion? What is your, and also bring us some of your anecdotes, because I know you have so many. If you can, we have a few minutes of effective negotiations. What are the techniques that you suggest that can help in any of our interactions with people? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Donato. Our friendship is a privilege for me, but you don't have to mention the years. But I'd like to reiterate our thanks to Eastern University for hosting this very important conference. All the participants, the partners here, because we have an incredible collection of talent from different walks of life and aspects, all join into the same future of education. We're talking about youth. Youth is humankind's biggest asset. It's a reservoir of talent, of energy, of optimism. At the same time, youth is a coil of pent-up negative energy, poverty, hate, fear, and vengeful frustration. And they coexist. And our job, biggest goal, is to enlarge the first and diminish as much as possible as the other second. I think it's easier said than done, because everything that is going on in the world is working towards, or against rather, this towards defeating this purpose, against this. I've actually coined a phrase to describe this belligerent uncertainty. It's belligerent because the use and threat of force, despite the admonitions of the UN Charter, is still again, the tool of choice of interstate relations. and uncertainty because this course of action is fraught with uncertainty because those wielding these tools of threat of force and force with such abandon have no idea where this belligerence of theirs may lead. So, you know, it's ironic, but at the end of the first quarter of the 21st century, the third millennium, we are in a situation which is more dangerous than the classic Cold War. You know, diplomacy, both bilateral, multilateral, is sidelined. It's sidelined not entirely, because what is sidelined is the diplomacy, multilateral diplomacy practiced through the mechanisms that were created 80 years ago for this diplomacy and date back for over 100 years. However, multilateral diplomacy continues, but it continues in groups of like-minded countries and regions and so on, which is not the same. And it doesn't help bring positions together. What it does is it actually draws them further apart. All of the above makes for a very, very difficult and precarious situation in the world. We're not yet in a world war, but we are living in a world that is at war. And that is very dangerous. And I'm afraid, despite our wish to see the Westphalian gene diminish, I think it's back with a vengeance. But what is our goal here? Our goal is to ensure that the new generations, current new generation, youth, and future generations do not fall back into this vicious cycle of conflict and of hatred and of vengeance. In this context, of course, higher education built around the university concept practice is extremely important. This is where you inculcate the good citizen elements of education. I would argue, however, that pre-higher education levels are extremely important, because if you have a young person, a teenager, coming to a university level, but already with a poisoned mind and frustrated with the vicissitudes of life, conflict, loss of parent, or other problems, you have a soul that is already affected, and that soul is very difficult to. The other problem is, when we're talking about universities, about how better to do this, how to use new technologies, we're talking about Eastern University, we're talking about Harvards, the Oxfords of this world. What about all those children and youth who have no access and no clue what is education? The worst and the most egregious aspect of this being child soldiers and children in armed conflict. Try to explain to the values of diplomacy to a child in the Lord's Resistance Army in northern Uganda. His only tool of diplomacy is an AK-47. So we have a long ways to go to bring most areas of geographic, political, if you will, to a level where we can profess diplomacy, we can teach those tools. The other thing is, when we talk about human diplomacy, absolutely, yes, but there is another word for it. It is education, it is family values, it is coping mechanisms that are rooted in communities. We are all so engaged in AI and how AI is going to enhance our learning. We should stop for a moment and ask ourselves the question, have we basically used up all the non-technical ways of bringing up the young generations? Are we inculcating in them the need to read and not get information from TikToks of this world. AI, enter AI, better minds than mine have spoken and will speak about this, so I don't need to elaborate much on it, but AI can have the same positive and same negative effect on education that it does on every other human endeavor. Let me just point out two things. The acronym AI, and we use the acronym HI, Human Intelligence, which has bred AI and which is our best hope that AI will be controllable, because technical people tell us that whatever AI can do is what we put into AI. However, it's not that simple. But I want to enter into this discussion another acronym, which is HN, which is human nature. AI is high technology. Human intelligence is developing, but human nature does not change, I'm afraid. So we have to bear that in mind and keep working on that. And last thing about the AI, I'm sorry, I think I'm taking a lot of time. But, we need guardrails. And the best idea I've heard now recently is let's have the UN do this. Well, the UN is a lot of things. It's an acronym that can be unwrapped many different ways. But if we look at our past performance, the member states to whom belongs the UN as an organization, if they don't change their nature and their absence and lack of multilateral approaches and the multilateral mindset, multilateralism is not an organization, it's a mindset. If they don't change that, they're going to engage in the same hanky-panky that they are engaging in on all other issues, whether it's disarmament or anything else. And when they do not come to any agreement, who's to blame? The UN. So as a former UN person, I don't want to see another area where the UN will be blamed. Let me just finish by providing some practical sort of directions. And, this keeps coming up in most of our sessions because it is there, and you mentioned it as well. But I want to divide it into three levels. At the country level, we have to eliminate the double standard. We have to dumb down, we cannot eliminate, we have to dumb down hypocrisy. We have to somehow get a handle on self-serving narratives and false labeling. These are all, you can call it diplomacy, you can call it what you will. These are all things that we need to practice and the young generation needs to learn and practice. At the society level, teach, explain the pitfalls of maximalism, the others, quote unquote, the others' fault. This has been, it's part of a lot of research being done and a big pitfall. And you were mentioning the ability to listen. Because when you listen, you learn and you find faults and you also find the strong sides. But it means that you are able to listen. And that's a big step towards getting to the negotiating part. And the worst part, of course, in societies and countries is the manipulation of youth. Because of their enthusiasm, because of their energy, because of their honesty, they are easily manipulated by the worst kinds of politicians in our reality. And lastly, as individuals, we need to be able to listen and communicate. We cannot talk at each other. And let us not rush to judgment. All these things are what we need to be teaching, because diplomacy is many things, but it's a set of tools. It's a way of it's a way of arriving at objectives through negotiations. But without these elements of emotional intelligence and the ability to do these things, we cannot use these tools. Thank you, sorry.
David, this was very rich, very valuable. In spite of being my friend, you achieved your task very well. So thank you.
English, you know, they say, well, this is rich. It's not always a good thing.
No, it is. It is. It is. It's a very vivid and and full of details, also full of aspects of life, of diplomacy, and you touched upon so many things that I will not repeat. But the last point perhaps has to be emphasized. Let's avoid to rush in terms of judgment. I mean, yes, we can be judgmental. We have to be judgmental at some point, but we also have, again, to observe reality, understand reality, and confront reality before reaching any conclusion. One of our masters, David, in diplomacy has been the Secretary General Hammarskjöld, that none of us met, but that is a reference in diplomacy. And being a great diplomat, the second Secretary General of the United Nations, who died in Congo while trying to pacificate the region through a peacekeeping mission of the UN, he was also writing, he wrote a book that I would recommend to you that is called Markings. It's full of poems. And one of his poems said simply that, since at the end of the day, after my work, all I ask myself is, have I done right? Could I have done better? I mean, so this was his reflections. There is always a way to do better. There is always a way that we can improve on what we have done. And there is no problem in having doubts. Keep the doubts for yourself, but go on. Now, as we go on, we have the second speaker today is Anna JERKOVIĆ. Anna also is a diplomat from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Croatia. She deals with European affairs in particular, and she is Vice President of Pugwash, Croatia. She should be online. Anna, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We hope that you heard what we have been saying until now, and that this reverberates with you, if not resonates with you positively. And so we would like you to give us your hints in terms of the skills that are required for a dialogue among people, and what are the virtues that you are representing every day, and what are the pitfalls that we fall in our career. Anna?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I've heard everything that was said, and I agree. First, I would like to emphasize what future education must contain in order to become more efficient and human-oriented, but also dedicated to sustainable peace and overall development and security. As I always say, our educational system needs to be transformed in order to serve the individual and the society in the best possible way, with addressing the skills and knowledge that we lack most in today's world, and that is emotional and social skills, as it was mentioned. Today, we lack emotional intelligence, empathy, patience, respect, and understanding. We live quick as consumers. We don't fix things. We throw them away. We don't invest in relations. We easily find new ones. We don't have the patience or will to fight for ideals, no respect for the different, and so on. We think we are the smartest. We think that we are superior. Often we lack self-criticism and self-observance, and therefore we live in a virtual safety. But as we witness, safety and security are fragile because we do not have strong foundations on which we could build them. Strong foundations are never material. They are moral, ethical, and spiritual. The individual will never feel safe until we discover the true purpose of our existence, not only as individuals, but as humankind. Most of us, namely, accept the fact of existence without critical thinking or need to discuss it or draw conclusions from it in all fields of human activity. But in order to act as decent, constructive, and enlightened human beings dedicated to human diplomacy, nurturing the art of dialogue and understanding, it is essential that we address these philosophical questions on our origin and our human nature. It is the individual is not an island. We are all part of nature, part of humankind with the same spiritual roots and divine spark. Although we belong to different nationalities, religions, ethnicities, cultures, inside we are all the same. We are all subject to the same laws of nature without exception. And exactly this is what unites us and what makes us all connected. Knowing this, accepting it, and implementing it, only then we can act constructive and benevolent towards others and ourselves. Human relations today suffer from the lack of this understanding, whether private or professional relations, national or international. Diplomacy starts with understanding what is good for the individual and for the society. What is it that unites us? Why does the other feel insecure or threatened? The study on human nature, therefore, is a basis for all other behavioral and social studies and has to be included in the educational system. Through practical psychology and understanding the connection between the human and nature, between the human and its nature, and then consequently humans between themselves. But it is important to know the order of priority. First to know ourselves, then to know our place within nature, and then to know our place in the society. We can all agree that the art of dialogue, as well as mediation and negotiation, can be effective if we all have one common goal, the well-being and development of all without harming anyone. Sometimes we have to choose between more or less bad outcomes, but in this situation, it is important to keep the benefit of the majority in sight, justice, the sustainability of the result, and also it is important not to have any losing party if possible, a mutually acceptable agreement. In diplomacy, many different skills are required. We have to be rational, moderate, know psychology, and have an expertise in the related field. We have to take into account different narratives, language. We have to actively listen and observe, as we heard before. We have to be open and sincere, have empathy, make a friendly environment, build trust, be sure that we understand what the other person says and feels. The key word is, of course, respect, respecting the other party and the other person, but also demanding respect for our own views and perspectives. In diplomacy, we have to balance between power, justice, and interest. We have to foster dialogue, open and sincere communication, and try to reach compromise, no matter how long it takes. To conclude, diplomacy is a complex skill, but it is required more than ever today when we face the internationalization of conflicts and overall global insecurity. But these skills are universal and fundamental. We can all make our contribution to peace and be diplomats in our everyday life through human diplomacy. It all starts with us, understanding our connection to one another and our human brotherhood. From that knowledge, we harvest respect, understanding, empathy, and the privilege to make the right decisions for the benefit of all.
Anna, thanks a lot for your address. Thanks a lot for being with us. I'm sure we will have a moment of interaction later on with some questions from the floor. If not, I will ask a couple of questions. I want to reiterate a couple of your points when you spoke about the moral foundations of human diplomacy. I definitely support your views, and critical thinking. Critical thinking is, in other words, what we were saying before, the importance of not jumping to conclusions, but analyzing the various realities that we are confronted with, and be ourselves. Let's not be afraid of being ourselves. And let's not, especially very important, and I can tell you that in my own practice, be ourselves means do not disguise for what you are not. And be aware of whoever disguises himself or herself into something else. Because the most important value is honesty, being yourself. That also helps gaining respect. Now, I want to go to the third panelist. I hope she is online. Laurence MARZAL. Laurence, are you there with us?
I'm there with you. I'm just behind you, in fact.
Fantastic. She is the Senior Program Officer of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. She's also the counterpart of the World Academy of Art and Science in a very important program that covers human security, that covers mediation and negotiation, that covers disarmament affairs, that covers the future of humanity as well. Why that? Because, first of all, parliamentarians are peace builders by themselves, are the ones that represent the people in parliaments, represent people in many venues across the society. So they are the elected ones. And being the elected ones, they carry a special responsibility. So the World Academy, the World Academy is accompanying the Inter-Parliamentary Union that happens to be the oldest international organization and a very prestigious international organization based in Geneva that has also produced many recommendations lately in the field of human security, in the field of disarmament, in the field of diplomacy as well. So what I would like to hear from Laurence is what do you think is the role of parliamentarians nowadays, and what the IPU, the Inter-Parliamentary Union, is up to doing? You know, what can we expect in the next few years in terms of this growing responsibility of parliamentarians, and how can you lead the way and tell us what is needed for parliamentarians from all over the world, I mean, to foster this dialogue, to help fostering the dialogue and understanding across cultures. Laurence?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Donato, and thank you very much for having me in this very interesting panel with very interesting co-panelists. If you don't mind, I will answer your questions from a theoretical point of view, since you have a former for not that long, parliamentarian with you, I mean, sitting next to you. As you said, indeed, parliaments and parliamentarians then are the cornerstone of a society. Their work, through their functions, are touching on every aspect of society and contributes to setting a direction for action. And when unaddressed divisions within and between societies pose significant challenges to peace and security, you know, there's political unrest, social inequalities, and cultural misunderstanding that fuels conflict and erode trust among communities, then the representative of the people, the parliamentarians, have this unique responsibility to bridge this divide. So they are by nature mediators when they manage to listen to each other, and that's exactly what you said in the very beginning. The start of mediation is to listen to others and to analyze and to understand. So they can bridge this divide, I mean, from different point of views, and including through using human security and trying to address root causes of conflict so that they don't, I mean, they stop. But parliaments are not only platforms for passing laws or holding governments accountable. They also serve as vital arenas for addressing grievance and fostering dialogue. And that's the whole point of it. When you start talking, when you can speak to others, when you can try to understand the others, then you can move forward. And mediation is a critical tool in this context. So by facilitating constructive communication between conflicting parties, parliamentarians can help create pathways for the resolution of a conflict, fostering trust in democratic institutions and reducing the probability of violence. That is both at national but also at international level. Mediation, however, is not simply about impartiality. It requires understanding that conflict is often rooted in emotions. And while political work is sometimes perceived as rational and objective, acknowledging the emotional dimension of dispute is essential for effective resolution. And this is something that you can call human relationship engineering, through which a third party can approach discussion and assist conflicting parties in finding mutually acceptable solutions. In some cases, this role may evolve into conciliation, where, the third party, the parliamentarian that I'm currently representing, actively contribute to shaping the outcome. We do believe at the IPU that parliamentarians are more than lawmakers. They are peace builders, they are trust builders. And through mediation, they can strengthen the social contract between citizens and institutions and help bridge divides of our increasingly polarized world. Just to go a bit more into details of what the IPU does to help parliamentarians achieve this mediation role. The IPU is a unique political animal, if I can say so, and its first aim is to create space for dialogue between parliamentarians from all over the world. Space for dialogue, facilitated dialogue. So for instance, we have several formal bodies where we can, we're providing some space for instance, having Israel and Palestine talk to each other. And so we have this Middle East committee, which is charged with doing so. We also have a task force on the peaceful resolution in the of the war in Ukraine, where currently we have several members of parliament which were trying to be the go-between between the Russian parliament and the Ukrainian parliament. We also have the group of facilitators for Cyprus in trying to find common grounds between the Greek and Turkish members. So, we're really trying to do that formally, but also informally. And in so doing, for instance, we're simply providing the possibility of bilateral meetings. And something that I'm really proud of, talking about the history of the organization that I'm representing, is, for instance, what happened during the Falklands War between Argentina and the UK, where there were no more diplomatic relations between the two countries in conflict, while still parliamentarians from both countries were talking to each other and contributed to the resolution of the conflict. So I would say parliamentarians are often overlooked, but they can contribute to a lot of things. And so in addition to providing the space for dialogue, the IPU is also providing several tools or several programs that can help parliamentarians be better when it comes to mediation. On the one side, we have a program on interfaith relations, interfaith and intercultural relations, where, the idea is really to foster these interfaith and intercultural relations by promoting dialogue, again, rooted in shared values and engaging diverse communities so that parliamentarians are empowered with tools to better mediate conflicts between communities. So if, and here I will be touching, of course, this issue of education, if you are able to better understand the one that are in front of you, that's also education. This is peace education. And then if you understand them, if you understand their values, then it will be better. I mean, it will be easier to talk to them. And here again, I'm going back to the fact that to really make sure that a conflict will not go further, you need to dialogue. Another tool that we are proposing to parliamentarians for them to better do their job when it comes to mediation is this tool, which is called Human Security and Common Security to Build Peace. Donato, you know it very well because, I mean, it's something that we've done together. And where, I mean, there are some good practices of how to organize peace education, how to better talk to the other with a big O, so that you can really create a dialogue that will help diffusing tensions. And to conclude, what will they need more? I mean, they will, as you said, mediation is a process and not everybody is aware of that process. And although you've been telling us some of the steps of that process, it is not something, it's not a given to really be able to go through this process. And so what I'm hoping to be able to organize next year is really capacity building of members of parliament to help them go through this process better, to understand it better, and so to do a better job when it comes to mediation. Thank you.
Laurence, thanks a lot for this comprehensive response in terms of what IPU is doing, where you are at this precise moment, what are you proposing for the near future? I think they are all objectives that we are sharing as World Academy of Arts and Science. So we are very pleased if we, as I said, we can accompany you through this process, if we can reinforce the capacities of parliamentarians from everywhere in the world. We have more advanced countries or places where there is more sensitivity around certain subjects and knowledge and skills. Others where these skills, these soft skills need to be imparted, where need to be reinforced. But as you said, the space for dialogue, Laurence, is there. This is what you are creating. We are very respectful and very grateful to you for these encouraging prospects. And I want to remind ourselves also that parliamentarians, as you said, they are peace builders, and they are very often on the forefront in terms of response to conflict, especially as humanitarian actors. It's humanitarian diplomacy. It's so relevant in many conflict zones. It's what David and I, we are familiar with that because in many times we have in our careers accompanied delegations. We brought delegations to conflict zones because they want to be appraised, they want to report, and they want to also generate assistance whenever that is possible through fundraising, through financial responses, through humanitarian aid. So humanitarian aid very often is created through the openings and the representation that parliamentarians offer to us in many situations, in disaster situations. Let's not think also of conflicts, but also disaster situations. That's also very, very relevant. Now, I have the privilege of having another representative of IPU, or former representative, in this case is Denis NAUGHTEN, is a former member of Parliament of Ireland and chairperson of the Working Group on Science and Technology. But for us is also a linchpin, a trait d'union, how do you want to say, with the organization itself, because he is very knowledgeable of all the practices of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, of parliamentary proceedings, and therefore he is a sort of advisor. I would say he's an advisor of the World Academy of Arts and Science, and I want to ask him, elaborating further on what Laurence said, which tools, we spoke about human security, but since we have developed together the human security package that is available even through iPhones, through mobile phones, that is a sort of knowledge, distilled knowledge that is available at the click of a button. And I think these are things that are very important, because we have studied a lot of issues, but we cannot remember everything. And sometimes we need an entry point. Sometimes we need the right language. Sometimes we need just the memory of the moment, on the spur of the moment. So tell us, Denis, what if you think that this is the right way, if this what parliamentarians are requesting, or if there are other things in future that you think we should develop together.
Thanks, Donato, and thanks for the opportunity to address you here. I think, first of all, the one piece of advice I'd give the audience here is that we're all born with two eyes, two ears, and just one mouth. And it is important that you use those senses. And I think probably the single most important aspect of mediation is active listening. Listening to actually hear what the other side is saying, to understand the motivation from the other side, and to then ask probing questions to elicit more information, rather than just listening to construct a response. I think that's critically important. And I think the one thing I'd like you to take from here today is that skill of active listening, which I think is imperative in terms of mediation. And I find when I meet members of Parliament from different parts of the world, we've all very similar problems. We can, first of all, empathize with each other in relation to those problems, but in a lot of cases, we can offer advice by that active listening to see exactly what their core issues are and maybe suggest some workable solutions to that. And I think that sets the foundation for building relationships that can then lead to long-term peace. And I think the World Academy and the IPU's initiative in relation to human security is vital in relation to that, because I think it brings about a mindset change in terms of engagement. It's about putting the individual at the center, about focusing on people's well-being, and building policy and solutions from the ground up. And within the IPU, in conjunction with the World Academy, we've now developed a toolkit to promote and develop peace. And I think it is something that can ensure that you can build equitable solutions using real life situations rather than looking at problems in the abstract. And I've had firsthand knowledge of this in relation to what is a very fragile peace process that is ongoing in Ireland. And it is a difficult coexistence that is there on our island between two traditions. And it has that relationship is about building bridges between the two communities on our island at neighborhood level, at community level, at country level. And what we have done in Ireland is that we have identified and built upon our common strengths and developing what we can actually agree on. So issues like agriculture, issues like tourism, where we have common goals. We on our island are working towards those. In relation to energy challenges, we're working with our neighbouring island in Britain on those as well. And it's about looking at what our strengths are, where our deficits are, and where we can work towards a common purpose. In my own example, I was Minister for the Environment in Ireland, and regardless of where we worship, we all breathe the same air, we all drink the same water, and we use the environment as a way of building bridges between communities, not just at intergovernmental level, but at community level. And we've used citizen science to build relationships with school children, between school children and their parents. And we now have school children working together in communities where their grandfathers were shooting each other. And that has happened through the neutral platform of science. And this is something the Inter-Parliamentary Union has built upon with our Science for Peace schools, where in the Middle East, in the Sahel region of West Africa, and in the Mekong River Basin in Southeast Asia, we're using science as the neutral platform to bring parliamentarians together to try and solve problems such as the issues of water security, working together towards a common goal. And that type of relationship building is vitally important, but it is based on the fact that we have two eyes, we have two ears, and that we must engage with people by first looking at the challenges and secondly, listening, actively listening to the other side. Thank you.
Denis, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your representation of what is the role of parliamentarians and how they really help bridging the gap in many situations, in situation of conflict, and the different aspects of diplomacy. You mentioned citizens science and the role of science diplomacy as such. I mean, nowadays we cannot say that diplomacy is a sort of esoteric art. It's an art for everybody. You have to know how to use it, how to employ it. But the future of it is really goes with your own legs and your own hands as well, in terms of approaching a situation, approaching people with different skills in different contexts, knowing that you really have to build bridges. I mean, the ultimate objective for our society is to build bridges. We may remain of different opinions. We may not have the same opinions in terms of our future, but we have to respect one another. So the essential element of this art is respect of our sensitivities, of our culture, of our position. The worst things that we can do to any opponent is really to lose face. You know, when you are in a negotiation, you always have to restrain yourself at some point, even if you have the last word and you say, I win. I mean, this time I made it. Well, let's be aware of the fact that there is always another round, and that can be a third round, a fourth round in any negotiation. So we never know when the game ends. And with this, now I would end the session and thank you for all of those who have been with us for this very productive meeting. Thank you.